Hi everyone, and welcome to Theory Week, starting tomorrow, Sunday, November 29th. And this week we're going to be looking at phenomenology. So let's get started. So this video is just going to be an introduction to, just a brief introduction to the readings, and with some discussion questions at the end. So we're going to get started. So a quick definition of phenomenology is it's the philosophical study of the subjective experiences of individuals as they engage and interact with the objective world. Phenomenology is always positioned as a first-person perspective, and it's anti-positivist in nature, and it's always an embodied experience. And the themes of phenomenology are experience, perception, self-awareness, and consciousness. So moving on to the next slide. So phenomenology is a philosophical approach to studying human experience and perception and consciousness, but as you'll note from the articles, a lot of the authors write about phenomenology as both a theory and a method. In fact, a lot of our authors write that phenomenology is actually a method. So it confused me and threw me off quite a bit, and I was getting anxious because I selected these articles and then I was doubting myself, like, is this a theory or a method? So I'm just going to go through some of the articles and just briefly describe all of them, and then go to the discussion questions. Okay, so I've learned that in phenomenology, there's actually no unified definition, and it's been written about in a variety of different disciplines such as psychology, sociology, archaeology, architecture, and religion, amongst others. And it really explores perceptions and emotions and senses, as well as embodied experiences, as well as memories and social activities. So I've just selected some of the key terms that have been used throughout the articles. So you'll notice the term noma, which really is the structure of any intentional acts, as well as essence, which is the structure of different meanings that explore the phenomena. The term life world is how we collectively and subjectively perceive the objective world. Intentionality actually doesn't really mean intention. It's the basic unit of measurement for phenomenology, and it's really the aboutness of an individual's mental state. Intersubjectivity, that seems pretty much an easier term, an easier concept. It's just how individuals interact and collaborate with each other. And epoch, or bracketing, is suspending judgment. So again, suspending bias of the objective world, and in terms of examining an individual's subjective experiences. Finally, Heidegger's concept of being, with the capital B, is just the state of consciousness. So there's actually a lot of key theorists who have been described in the articles, but I actually would just like to briefly mention just four, because there was too many to describe. So Edmund Husserl is the founder of modern phenomenology. Martin Heidegger was his student or research assistant. And it's just interesting to note that Edmund Husserl was a German Jew, and Heidegger actually ended up being a member of the Nazi Party. That just sounds such like an interesting student-teacher relationship. And Maurice Merleau-Ponty is also another researcher who also further studied phenomenology, and of course Jean-Paul Sartre. So those are the ones that were constantly being written about in the articles. There were so many more, but I just couldn't list all of them. So okay, so these are the selected trails of phenomenology. When I'm talking about, hope you can read them, the trails are like flavors or different variations of phenomenology. So I was going to use the word flavors, but I think trails is the official term. In a lot of the articles, there were 6 or 7 that were cited. I actually found much more, so I thought of including 8. There's humaneutic, transcendental, existential, historical, realistic or realist, constitutive, embodied, and genetic phenomenology. So in this slide, and I apologize for the contrast. I mean, I think it's pretty readable. It's there's the theorist who is attached with kind of developing that trail of phenomenology is actually listed here. So here's a brief review of the articles for this past week for the phenomenology theory. Okay, so John Budd, I've included a lot of articles from him, but here are 2 articles that were very similar, and they were all about PCR, which is phenomenological critical realism. So 2 of his articles really were focusing on merging or integrating critical realism with phenomenology, and Budd proposes a new research method, which he proposes that would be really great for studying different research in library and information science. And in his articles, both of these articles from 2010 and 2012, he is proposing the merger of these 2 philosophical frames, and he's discussing Husserl and Bhaskar's work on these theoretical perspectives, and he's proposing this research method that will be appropriate for studying in library and information science, specifically instructional programs and information-seeking research. And the actions that are influenced by these 3 domains are the real, which is the objective world, the actual, which is the actual subjective human interactions and experiences, and the empirical, which are through actions and observations. And in his other article, this one was really interesting. It was about phenomenology and organizational behavior. And this is really about how managers kind of teaching managers how to properly communicate with their staff. So Budd and Velasquez really argue that communication problems can be solved by adopting a phenomenological attitude. So one of the discussion questions is, what exactly is a phenomenological attitude as opposed to a more traditional attitude? So managers should really depart from this natural attitude, which creates the unequal power relations between I versus you, manager versus staff. And the phenomenological attitude, it really is showing empathy and active listening, as well as self-reflection, and really fostering intersubjectivity in their life world. So in other words, understanding not their own experience, but also a shared consciousness and understanding the experiences of other people that you're working around. So another article, this one was also more of an applied article in phenomenology. So it's the article's Future Challenges and Emerging Role of Academic Libraries in Pakistan, a phenomenological approach by Ashik Rehman and Mujtaba, and they conducted in-depth interviews with 14 senior level library leaders, and they really asked them their experiences serving as library directors and how technology has impacted library services. And it really was about describing the challenges faced by libraries. And a component of phenomenology is describing, very, 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 very open-ended descriptions. So that's another concept I read about phenomenology. And really, the theme of this article is really focusing on how technology has impacted library services and resources. And the authors broke down their analysis by asking about current and prospective challenges and also possible solutions. Another article by Bud was Phenomenology and Information Studies. And in this article, Bud provides actually a literature review of the major theorists that are associated with phenomenology, specifically Husserl, Heidegger, and Merleau-Ponty. And he states many times that phenomenology is not a method, but an attitude or a philosophical approach. So he coins the term, Husserl coins the terms essence, epoch, and intentionality, which I've already defined before, and it leads to a theory of knowledge, and Heidegger departs from his Husserl and writes more about hermeneutics and the concept of design, which being and consciousness. And then Merleau-Ponty really focuses more on perceptions of those experiences. And Bud really is trying to apply the concepts that these three theorists have developed for phenomenology and applying them to different research relating to information retrieval, information encountering, and any interactions between the information seeker and the information professional. In this is a very interesting article in a phenomenological study of conservative academic librarians by Kendrick and Damasco. This is an applied article where the authors are using phenomenology as a theoretical approach to study the professional experiences of librarians in academia who identify as conservative. So they sampled 17 academic librarians and interviewed them, as well as administered a supplementary survey to add to their qualitative interviews. And they described 14 themes that would detail the experiences of academic librarians who identify as conservative, who are really focusing on how they feel working alongside non-conservative librarians. So the interviewees reported feelings of feeling alienated, discriminated against, misunderstood, excluded, as well as feeling marginalized. And in another study, also by Kendrick, this study was also an applied study of phenomenology, and it really hit close to home for me. I really, the subject of this article was very personal for me, and it really focused on the low morale experience of academic librarians who experience workplace bullying. So this is also very interesting because the author explored the feelings and the experiences of low morale amongst academic librarians. And so Kendrick actually sampled 20 academic librarians and conducted interviews. And she classified the interview data into 12 themes and revealed the many different ways that academic librarians experience low morale, really focusing a lot on workplace bullying. This article stuck out as the only article that actually did not study humans, didn't study people. So this I have to say was a little odd. This article was social media use in academic libraries, a phenomenological study. So Harrison, Buras, Velasquez, and Schreiner were trying to examine the phenomena of libraries that engage in social media marketing. And it's something that I do in my library. So of course this piqued my interest. The authors actually analyzed social media postings. They didn't actually interview librarians. They actually analyzed the language of social media marketing postings from 6 social media platforms, but they were also sampling from 6 academic institutions from 2 states. The institutions were divided into 3 categories: institutions with ARL libraries, institutions with MLS and PhD programs in information science, and institutions that were neither ARL libraries or had MLS PhD programs. They coded 387 social media posts into 10 thematic codes and 3 marketing themes: community connections, inviting environment, and provision of content. Very, very interesting article, but I think it stuck out for me because I was expecting I was expecting them to actually interview like the librarians or the library workers who were actually responsible for composing these social media posts on the different social media platforms. So this article threw me off because they were studying the phenomena of the actual language and the consistency of libraries across the nation, or libraries were really engaged in the dissemination of marketing activities on social media. The next article, this one was very, very interesting and also very practical. So this was an applied article, and it's entitled Collective Success, a phenomenological case study of Ohio public libraries. So this article explores the phenomenon behind the collective success and the best-in-nation status of the Ohio public library system. 34 public libraries in Ohio, 9 that were large metropolitan libraries, and 25 mid-sized libraries really comprise this system in the state of Ohio, and they were ranked high by the Hennen American Public Library Ratings, as well as Library Journal's Star Libraries statistical rankings. And the author conducted semi-structured interviews with 10 librarians and asked them to describe their experience working for a successful public library that really, and talking about success, it's a library where the state actually supports them, and so how do they feel feeling supported, feeling valued? And that's something that also contributes to phenomenology. So the interviews were analyzed using phenomenological data analysis with 2 primary themes and 6 sub-themes. The 2 primary themes were the funding model, Ohio's funding model, and the Ohio Public Library environment. And those 2 themes had different sub-themes, such as the funding amount, the funding consistency, and the concept of money making money. And then the public library environment was all about the collaboration, physical environment, as well as the value of libraries. This article also was, I would say, quite strange. This article was revealing the essence of things using phenomenology in library information science. This author actually squeezed in 2 different studies in the same article, which could have been 2 different articles. So this was odd because the author described 2 library information studies in which he employs phenomenology and describes it as a theory, method, and an approach. So the first mini-study was looking at the meaning of web-based government information and how different library employees as well as government employees, how they conceptualize the idea of web-based government information as a publication. So basically defining what publication means to them. So the author interviewed 16 individuals, web managers working in government agencies, as well as digital depository librarians, and asked them what the concept of publications meant as it relates to web-based government information. So really it was about conceptualizing the concept of like, what does a publication mean in a web-based environment? The second study was the pleasure of boys' love stories. So boys' love stories are love stories between 2 or more men, but they're created by women for women. And it was popularized in China, Japan, and Taiwan. So they resemble fantasies and they don't actually reflect same-sex love stories between men. And the author interviewed 6 individuals and asked them about how they became interested in boys' love stories and their reasons and motivations to becoming fans. So these 2 studies were very interesting, and I felt like you're getting like a 2-for-1 special because you're reading one article that really examines 2 different studies. I don't know why they weren't separated into 2 different articles, but I found this one was also very interesting. So this is the last article. This was a really difficult article to unpack. This was really focusing on the uses of phenomenology, so very similar to Bud's articles, but also the research method attached to phenomenology, which is phenomenography. So this article provided historical background of both phenomenology and phenomenography, very similar to Bud's articles. They traced the historical roots of phenomenography and found that it was first used in 1902 by Falcomer, who was a mathematician. Falcomer's book used concepts from parapsychology based on writings from Husserl's student, Gerda Walther. Overall, it was really based on Husserlian phenomenology. And phenomenography, as a qualitative method, is a framework that it also originates from Husserlian phenomenology. So one is a methodological framework, but phenomenology is a theoretical framework. So the author really broke them apart and described both as different kinds of frameworks. Modern phenomenography is known as Martonian phenomenography, named after Ferenc Marton, who's still alive, who is a Swedish educational psychologist. And phenomenography is often used in educational research, and it examines the individual's ideas about the phenomenon, not the actual phenomenon itself. So the four themes of phenomenography include surface and deep learning, variation, categories of the description, and second-order description. And the 6 trails of phenomenology, which I've already described in the table before, there are more than 6, but the authors only describe 6: realistic, constitutive, existential, embodied, hermeneutic, and historical. I did find many more in other articles. And the 3 lines of work in phenomenography are recording what is actually said or happening, interpreting the collected conceptions, and answering questions about the essence of experiences. Finally, in terms of the method in which they are trying to cull the data, the authors examine the usage of phenomenology and phenomenography from the same 6 academic LIS journals, and they're focusing on its characteristics and which trail of phenomenology and phenomenography is related to their articles. So, the authors identified 13 articles that relate to phenomenology from 2008 to 2014, and they identify 8 articles that relate to phenomenography, also from 2008 from 2014, using the same 6 LIS journals. And the authors found that phenomenographic articles used the same concepts from phenomenology, and they recommend that future researchers should adopt new terminology. So in all of the articles that have been assigned for this week, I've just listed some of the qualitative research methods that are associated with phenomenology, such as phenomenography, which I've mentioned 2 seconds ago. Another one, which is known as IPA, interpretive phenomenological analysis, and it's usually used in psychology to study how a person makes sense of a given phenomena, very similar to phenomenography. Interviews, focus groups, and surveys. Content or discourse analysis, observational methods, narrative research, action research, as well as participatory design research. Some of these methods are associated with education research, and not really in a lot of LIS journals. So in my final slide, here are some of the discussion questions that I would really like to engage with all of you this week. I'm going to post them on the discussion board, and they are: why is phenomenology described as a method by some authors and as a theory by others? How would you interpret Bud's description of the phenomenological attitude? How is phenomenology related to other theories we've read about so far? And finally, did any of the readings pique your interest more than others? So, I'm sorry that this introduction is so long. 24 minutes is way too long, so you can definitely skip through some parts. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to engaging in a really, really fruitful discussion this week on the theoretical approach to phenomenology. And I look forward to chatting this week. Okay, bye everyone.